we'll just do right before we get into the meeting. National Drowning Prevention Week, July 15th to July 21st, 2018. Whereas the mission of the Life Saving Society of Canada is to prevent drowning throughout this great country, and even one drowning in Alberta is one too many, and whereas most drownings are preventable in a water-smart community and only through water-smart education and a healthy respect for the potential danger that any body of water may present, can we truly enjoy the beauty and recreation opportunities offered by these bodies of water. And whereas the Life Saving Society urges Canadians and residents of the town of Beaumont to actively supervise children who are in and around the water, to refrain from drinking alcoholic beverages while participating in aquatic activities, and to wear a life jacket at all times while boating. And whereas the Life Saving Society of Canada has declared July 15th to 2018 National Drowning Prevention Week to focus on the drowning problem and the hundreds of lives that could be saved this year. Now, therefore, I, Mayor John Stewart, do hereby proclaim the week of July 15th to July 21st, 2018 as National Drowning Prevention Week in the town of Beaumont, dated this 10th day of July, 2018. Thank you. All right, call the meeting to order, 7 p.m. Are there any changes to the agenda from admin? Ms. Winter.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's no additions or deletions to the agenda at this time.
Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda? Councillor Daniluk.
So moved, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. It's stuck. It's not going to do it. All right. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Tonight we have two items on our consent agenda. I move that Council consent to approve the following agenda items without debate. Item 4A, regular Council meeting, June 26, 2018. That Council accept the minutes of the June 26, 2018 regular Council meeting as presented. And item 7A, Place Chalarousse Phase 6 subdivision extension, that Council approve a one-year extension of the subdivision approval for SDA 15-01, Place Chalarousse Phase 6 to expire on July 8th, 2019. Any discussion on the motion? All right. Hearing none. All in favor? Carried. Next item on the agenda, item 5A. We have one public hearing this evening for bylaw. Jared?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, was there another item on the consent agenda?
Nope, just the three.
The census was not on the consent agenda?
Ms. Winter?
It has a star next to it on my
Thank you,
agenda.
Worship, through you to Councillor Barnhart. On consent agenda, we need motions in order to pass it in one go. And with regards to that one being on the consent, we don't actually need a motion. It's only for informational purposes only. So it's just for a reading.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. You made a motion for the two that
For the two,
but the third one doesn't need a motion?
because it's just for information, so we'll just have a quick.
She's asking about the seats.
Okay, so it is passed, it's just not
Correct.
Well,
requiring a separate motion? Is that
Correct. There's no motion needed for this agenda item, and therefore it is on the consent agenda for informational purposes only.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you.
no, I was. So how did it, because we didn't move to actually pass that one. So do we have to deal with it when we get to it, or?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to members of council, we don't actually need a motion at all for this agenda item.
Oh, okay. So fair enough. I understand now. So it's a report. It's information. All right, back to bylaw 918-18, public notification bylaw. Public hearing is now open. The hearing is held pursuant to sections 23606 and 606.1 of the Municipal Government Act 2000 as amended. Ms. Winter, care to speak?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to members of council and the public, the purpose of bylaw 918-18 under section 606.1 of the Municipal Government Act allows municipalities to adapt their advertising methods to use one or more methods of advertising proposed bylaws, resolutions, meetings, public hearings, public notices, or other matters. The public hearing notice was advertised in the local newspaper on June 29th and July 6, 2018. Any written submissions received are included in the public hearing agenda package, and there is currently nothing to read into the record at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to ask the General Manager of Corporate Services, Mr. Alan Harris, to speak to the item.
Through your worship, to council and the public. As indicated by the Supervisor of Legislative Services, the purpose of bylaw 91818 under section 606.1 of the MGA is to provide alternative methods of advertising, which would include Facebook, social media, and the sign on 50th Street.
Fair enough. Are there any clarifying questions from members of council? Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Harris. I just want to make sure that I understand correctly that the intention of this bylaw is to notify all affected residents in the best way possible. The way I understand the MGA, that's the intention, and there's not a lot of words in that bylaw, so I just want to make sure that my interpretation is correct.
Through your worship, to Councillor Barnhart, the rest of the council and the public, yes, that's the intent.
Are there any further questions from members of council? Easy. Is there anybody in the audience tonight wishing to speak in favor of the bylaw? Is there anybody in council chambers this evening that are opposed to the bylaw? Is there any person in the council chambers tonight deeming themselves to be affected and wishes to be heard? Once, twice, sold. All right, public hearing is now closed. There being no registered presentations on the agenda tonight, we'll move straight into unregistered presentations. Once again, as a reminder, this isn't a town hall. It's a brief opportunity for members of the public to come up and address members of council on issues of the day, and if we can get a quick answer, we will, but likely, if we can't, we will refer it to admin for further action. Is there anybody in the audience wishing to speak to council this evening? Nope. All right. Item 7B, the census update. No motion needed, but is there any questions of members of council for admin? Are we good? Seconds. Okay, item 8A, bylaw 921-18, amendment to Direct Control District Development Authority, first reading. Ms. Dargy.
Thank you, Worship and members of council. Presented this evening is an amendment to the land use bylaw to delegate decisions to the development officer for all existing direct control districts that have specific regulations. The Municipal Government Act permits council the ability to use direct control districts. Direct control districts are typically used when the standard land use bylaw districts do not fit for proposed or innovative development, or when council wants to retain particular development control over a site. Currently, we have direct control districts with specific regulations and some direct control districts that are open-ended in the land use bylaw, and then they are at the sole discretion of council. For those districts with specific regulations, the approving authority is split, with some districts having council approval and some having administration approval, depending on how the applicant presented that particular district. When considering direct control applications, the approving authority cannot vary council's direction, and bringing routine development permits to council for approval adds uncertainty to the process, leads to longer turnaround times, and complexity to the process. For these reasons, administration is recommending an amendment to the land use bylaw so that all existing direct control districts with specific regulations delegate a development authority to the development officer. This will allow administration to approve development permits in a more timely and efficient manner, as they will not have to go to council for a public hearing and approval. To confirm, council will remain the development authority on direct control districts that do not have specific written regulations, or if a variance to a specific direct control regulation is required. In this regard, administration recommends first reading to bylaw 9/2118.
Thank you very much. Do I have a member of council that will move first reading? Councillor Danluck.
So move, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. So before I open up to clarifications, questions from council, I just want to make sure I got this straight in my mind. So essentially what we're doing is we're going to allow a direct control district to be treated the same as any other land use district in our municipality, as long as you don't need a variance and it falls within the scope of what's laid out in the direct control district. It doesn't need to come back to council, but all the rest of it does.
That's correct. So the regulation itself, to implement those regulations, to write those regulations into the land use bylaw, always come to council. But once those regulations are there, the approving authority on development permits would rest with the development officer.
That makes sense. Councillor Margolis-Swain.
Thank you, Your Worship. Being cognizant that this is first reading, I've got some comments on it, but I'll save those for after the public hearing, considering good lesson I learned last week, or 2 weeks ago. As more of a comment, would be that when you bring it back for a second, third reading, could you provide a bit of a comparison to what some other municipalities, how they handle this challenge? I appreciate we need to forge our own path, but without having any experience in this sort of stuff, I'd just be curious on how other municipalities deal with this. I'll do my own research, but I appreciate if you could provide just a brief summary on how other municipalities deal with these direct control districts. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions from members of council? Hearing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, next item on our agenda tonight, bylaw 924-18, land use bylaw amendment, define and regulate cannabis retail stores. And once again, Ms. Dargy.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. Presented this evening is an amendment to the land use bylaw to define and regulate cannabis retail stores. As you are aware, the federal government has announced that on October 17th, recreational cannabis will be legal in Canada. In response to federal legislation, the provincial government has developed a framework to regulate cannabis sales, licensing, public consumption, safety, and enforcement related to cannabis. Municipalities will play an important role in the legislative framework for the legalization of recreational cannabis using the tools provided under the Alberta Gaming, Liquor and Cannabis Act. And in this regard, they have the ability to determine the following: the definition of cannabis and related terms, where cannabis-related land uses may occur, whether those uses will be permitted or discretionary, and whether there are any additional regulations that should be considered in relation to that use. The proposed amendments provide definitions for cannabis, cannabis accessories, and cannabis retail stores. Cannabis retail stores shall not be located within 500 meters from any other existing cannabis retail store and may be located within the C2 Commercial District and TCMU Mixed Use District as a discretionary use. Administration proposes the use to be discretionary, which is consistent with many municipalities in the region. The effects of this use are not well known or understood, and it is prudent to take a cautious approach initially and then consider expanding it if appropriate. A discretionary use allows the development officer to consider the impacts of cannabis retail on other uses and vice versa. The proposed amendments are consistent with federal and provincial legislation and take into account the results of the cannabis survey that was conducted in April. That public engagement indicated a preference to regulate cannabis similar to liquor stores, and the proposed regulations are similar to our current alcohol use regulations. Cannabis production, processing, and cultivation land use matters will be addressed in the full rewrite of the land use bylaw. Cannabis consumption and use in that regard is not a matter that can be addressed through the land use bylaw. Administration recommends first reading to bylaw 924-18.
Thank you very much. Do I have a member of council willing to move first reading? Councillor Munkoff-Swain.
I'll move that first reading.
And questions on the motion? Comments? Ooh, interesting. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. And for clarification purposes at this point, because it's just first reading, somewhere I had read that there were existing retail outlets that were grandfathered in when we were looking at the schools and the location. That's no longer an issue, is what I'm thinking, because we're now saying it's the distance between stores, not the distance from schools.
Councillor Barnhart, sorry. Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Barnhart. Currently, the provincial legislation regulates the distance to schools and healthcare facilities, and it's 100 meters separation distance between the school land to the cannabis land use, the cannabis store. Our regulations propose just to regulate between cannabis retail stores, and that's 500 meters.
So just to be clear, so the 100 meters is a provincial regulation?
That's correct.
Provincial, you said?
Yeah.
And that, we all have to follow that one?
That's correct.
Obviously.
The municipality does have the opportunity to increase that.
make it bigger.
To change that. But at this time, we're not making any of those proposals.
I know I had read that somewhere, and I wasn't clear on it, so I just wanted to clarify that. And I guess the other part of that is that there's some grandfathering that's allowed as well. If someone has had a business before, do they now have to go for another license, and if they're within that 100 meters, they can't operate, or how does that work?
I'm not aware of the grandfathering because cannabis is not legal at this point in time, so no cannabis retail stores would
Maybe
be
it's
legal.
the products and things like that.
Yeah, and there might be the cannabis accessories that might be grandfathered in because cannabis accessories are legal. Just the cannabis itself is not. Cannabis retail stores can include cannabis accessories, so that might be where the grandfathering comes in. Beaumont doesn't currently have any retail stores that have cannabis accessories.
I think I'm mixing it up with vaping as well. There's so much going on, it's hard to keep track.
Councillor Danlick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Ms. Dargy, on appendix, or attachment 1, pardon me, on second page, it says home-based businesses, and in red it says this use excludes cannabis retail stores. So that, just to clarify, my understanding when I read that is you cannot have a home-based cannabis retail store. Is that the correct interpretation of what that means?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Daniluk, that's correct. So all of the uses that we have listed there where it indicates this use excludes cannabis retail store, in each of those uses you could not have a cannabis retail store included with that type of use. We want to make sure that we keep those separate.
Thank you.
Councillor Munkoff-Swain.
Thank you, Your Worship. More of a process question regarding the licensing. I appreciate we don't have so just looking for some background. So I understand if you're looking to get a cannabis retail business, you've got to apply to the Alberta Game and Liquor Association. They then award the license, so Beaumont doesn't have any control over that. All we do is just set the land use for that, correct? So set the correct land use, and if they're successful, then, as long as it meets the land use, then they come in, essentially. Is that correct?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Munkoff-Swain. That's correct in the process. So to clarify, the process is an applicant would go to AGLC first, obtain their approval in principle. Once cannabis is legal in October, then they could come to the town, make their land use application, and then we would evaluate it based on our regulations. Once they have that approval, then they go back to AGLC and actually get their permission to proceed to sell.
Perfect, thank you.
And then just following up with that, they would also require a business license from Beaumont then?
That's correct. All retail businesses require that.
Okay. Any last questions from members of council? All right, hearing none. Call the vote. All in favor? Carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda tonight is bylaw 925-18, amendment to C2 Commercial District, Education Services, first reading. Ms. Darchie.
Thank you, and your worship, members of council. Presented this evening is another amendment to the land use bylaw to accommodate education services as a discretionary use in the C2 commercial district and to add additional regulations as section 8.11.7. Administration has been actively working with the Francophone School Board to determine an acceptable location to accommodate their need for additional space. The school's main facility is currently located in a temporary location at 5505 Magasin Avenue, which is right next to the RCMP detachment, and they are currently over capacity. With a lack of suitably sized municipal reserve parcels, other options needed to be considered for expansion, including leasing additional space in nearby commercial developments. The school has recently received permission from the Minister of Education to lease space in the Bryant Heritage Plaza, and they wish to be ready for the 2018-19 school year. This site is currently districted to C2 commercial, and education services are currently neither a permitted nor a discretionary use within that district. And in order to accommodate this, the land use bylaw must be amended. Administration recommends that education services be added as a discretionary use to enable not only the Francophone School to move into this commercial space, but to also allow the opportunity for vocational or trades training options and other types of educational services to be located within this district. Administration recommends the use to be discretionary, as there may be incompatibilities with existing adjacent developments which will need to be reviewed prior to issuing a permit. Additional regulations for education services within the C2 commercial district have been incorporated to match those found in the DC 110 temporary Francophone school district to limit permits for education services to a maximum approval period of 10 years. The purpose of these additional regulations are to ensure that this school site remains an interim solution until a permanent school is built for the Francophone school. Administration is supportive of the inclusion of education services into the C2 commercial district to accommodate the expansion of the Francophone school and recommends first reading to bylaw 925-18.
Thank you very much. Is there a member of council willing to move first reading this evening? Councillor Hendricks. Thank you. Discussion on the motion? Okay. All right, okay, Councillor Barnhart. I'll go last.
I have another question. Thank you, Your Worship. And this question is regarding the combination of schools and businesses. We just talked about having regulations that prohibit some businesses from being near a school, potentially. Mm-hmm. So would this school then reduce the availability of business space for some of the businesses? If the school, is that considered a school then, if it's in a commercial area? And do the provincial rules kick in?
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Barnhart. So yes, the provincial legislation would kick in. So while the school is in this location, within 100 meters, a cannabis retail store would not be able to be located.
So if the school is moved into another commercial district, then that district will be affected by that as well?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I got comments on that one. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not quite sure how to ask this question. It's along the same lines, exact same lines, and so I've been following along the applications to ALGC, or whatever that acronym is, and this could potentially impact some of those applications. What's our process for reaching out to that potential? Do we have any recourse to reach out to that business? Are they potential business? Are they aware of it? I guess, do you kind of get what I'm asking without saying too much? I'm not sure what I can say up here. So essentially, is there a way that we can ensure that businesses who are looking to go in here are notified of this? And I'm sure we do our regular notification, but if you're just applying for business, you might not receive that notification. So what are some of those steps regarding the cannabis?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Munkoff-Swain. So I've been in contact with AGLC to find out how we can obtain a list of all of the approved or approved in principle locations and applicants, and they will not provide that information. So I have no way of notifying potential applicants of this other than through our normal course, our website, newspaper. So if they're local, they will have that notification. If they're from outside of Beaumont, that will be much more difficult to advise them. We do have a number of people interested, and we are receiving a lot of calls, especially now that the federal government has announced the date that it is going to become legal. That those calls have actually increased significantly. So we are maintaining a list of those calls that are coming in, so we can reach out to those people because we know that they've contacted us directly, but if we haven't been contacted in any way, we have no way of notifying them.
Okay, just a follow-up.
Follow up, go ahead.
Sorry, I get that, and I mean, we can only do so much. At the end of the day, there's some ownership that needs to be taken. Okay, sorry, thank you for the clarification on that. Just another, an ask, I guess, before we come back. Some questions that I'll have is around the moving from one site to the other. So obviously, you know, you've got an RCMP station in there, and you've got the car wash, which is pretty busy. It looks like there's a path, but I assume we've taken that into consideration, drop off, all that sort of stuff. So I'll have some questions about that going forward. So if we could provide some background information on how the students will be moving back and forth, if they are, or if it's just getting dropped off or not. Thank you.
Yeah, I have some similar questions to Councillors Barnhart and Munkoff-Swain. Did I hear that correctly, that if we allow a school to them to rent space, we would have to start treating this like a school? Because I hesitate to put a school into a commercial zone and have it curtail business, because we're trying to attract business in a big way. I don't mind if a school goes in and rents classroom space, as long as they recognize they're a classroom in a mall and it retains its flavor. Did I hear that right? Or what's the intention here?
So in order for a school to even rent space, as you indicated, to even rent a space in a strip mall, they need to be zoned appropriately for that use. So the use is an education service, and then that would affect any uses that would be incompatible with that. So right now, the only use that would be incompatible is a cannabis retail store. There are no other regulations, so there are no regulations that I'm aware of, and I can confirm that, for an alcohol sales. So there's no prohibition on that. And I'm not aware of any other retail uses that would not be allowed next to a school that are regulated by the province.
What about any regulations on the school side in relation to drop-offs, pickups, that sort of thing? How is that going to affect the businesses that are?
Can you please clarify that? I'm not sure what you mean.
Most schools have a front drop-off area where buses come and drop kids off and kiss and go. Okay. And maybe this is a question that you can take back and answer at second reading. But is there any issues surrounding that and regulations that we would all of a sudden have to comply with that would be incompatible with that type of zoning?
I'll note that.
Ms. Mohammed.
Thank you, Your Worship. In terms of transportation for the site, it would be pulling off onto Magazine Ave just like they do for the existing site. There is sidewalks there that they'd be able to unload on and then get into the site. Something else to consider when you're thinking about this is the municipality has an obligation to work through development permits as they're approved, and to not approve a permit on something that may or may not happen in the future in a location, kind of dicey ground to be on for a municipality. So in this case, the redistricting has come in, next the permit will come in. In the retail environment that's there right now and the uses proposed there right now, there is nothing to indicate that this use wouldn't be an appropriate use in this area. So something to consider. Now, in terms of thinking about the other types of businesses being considered in Beaumont, what we could do is post a map on the website that has the buffer area around all the education sites in town, so it's clear what commercial areas there is availability for those type of retail uses. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Daniluk.
Thank you, Your Worship. I realize it's first reading, so I'll keep my two quick questions, if you don't mind. Mr. Dargy, I know we've been talking, administration's been talking to the Francophone School Board about this opportunity for them to expand their educational services. So I'm assuming they've signed off from a safety perspective. The reason being is they've come to us before, existing location has safety concerns, and they're now going down the street to another commercial, not another commercial location, another location that's more commercial. Have they already signed off from their perspective that they have no safety concerns at this point?
Thank you, Worship, through to Councillor Daniluk. So to further to Ms. Mohammed's comments, when the development permit comes in, that's when those issues would be addressed. So we would work with the applicant at that time to make sure that there are no safety concerns or that they're mitigated to ensure that the development can proceed.
Okay, thank you. I withdraw my second question. That's okay. Thank you.
No, fair enough. Any further questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll call the vote. Let's make sure I'm on the right side. All in favor? That carries unanimously. Last bylaw on the agenda tonight. Bylaw 918-18, public notification bylaw, second and third reading. Mr. Harris.
Through your worship to council and the public. Further to the public hearing held tonight, administration is recommending that council give second and third reading to bylaw 918-18 public notification.
That's it?
That's it.
Wow, going quick tonight. All right, so member of council willing to move first reading?
Second reading.
Second reading, sorry. Councillor Hendricks.
So moved, Your Worship.
Discussion on the motion. Councillor Hendricks.
Nothing further.
Nothing further? Councillor Moncalsway.
And I apologise, Councillor Barnhart, if I'm asking a question that you're going to ask, but you triggered it a couple of weeks back that there was a conversation about the local newspaper and the words and or after that. So if I read this bylaw correctly, we could satisfy our obligations under the Municipal Government Act by simply posting it on a Facebook page.
Through your worship to Councillor Monkoff-Swain and the rest of council and the public, yes.
Okay, so given the fact that not everyone's on Facebook, obviously, and I'm sure that's not the intention of what you're trying, we're not trying to limit this. We're not trying to limit our notification around this, but the local newspaper is where a lot of people get their information from, and they go to that fifth or sixth page or whatever it is where all the ads are regarding from the town of Beaumont. So my concern by saying and or is that we would have the option to move away from that, and if we needed to get something done in a hurry, we would just slap it up on Facebook or would put it on our website, and that wouldn't be notifying the community. So before I entertain any change, I'll leave that statement there and just ask if any other councillors have that concern. Is this something that I'm alone on this, or do we potentially take out the or word in there? So I'll leave it at that, and I'll hear if anyone else has any comments. Thank you.
Councillor Hendricks.
Worship, the last time this was brought before council, administration gave us the best efforts discussion regarding how they would move forward. So, and I'm comfortable with that. So.
Thank you. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Monkoff-Swain, because I wasn't at all sure that I wasn't just blowing in the wind there when I was talking about it, because it does, to me, I'm pretty literal, and when it comes to legislation, that concerns me, that it says the and or, and there really is no guarantees. I kind of talked myself into believing, as Councillor Hendricks has said, that it's up to the administration to deliver their best efforts. And I did ask the question during first reading again and was told virtually the same thing. But we all can change our places and different people will be making decisions, so I'd like to see something change in here, but at this point I don't know what our options are given this is second reading. So I think at this point I'd be voting against it.
through your worship, to the rest of the council and the public. As indicated in the previous meeting, this is a recommendation put forward by AUMA in regards to using the and/or. The reason behind that is it's not the intent to not publish in the paper. The intent is, if there is an issue to deal with, is to, on tomorrow or late tonight, tomorrow, put it out on Facebook. That's when the timing starts in regards to when you can hold that meeting. So it increases the ability for to deal with an issue that is of pressing importance. It would still be advertised in the paper. And the reason, my understanding, the reason for the and/or is because it allows for that timing. The intent, as indicated, is this is not to restrict the advertising. This is to enhance it. And as indicated, the recommendation in the bylaw that from AUMA was to use the wording and/or.
Thank you. Just a quick clarifying question, though. We're on a bit of a timeline with this. We have to have one of these done by July.
Through your worship, no, this is not a timeline. The timeline was in regards to the public participation,
right?
Not the public hearing one. So there is no timeline on this.
Okay, fair enough. I got it confused with the public. Councillor Montgomery, question?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And I fully acknowledge Councillor Hendrick's comments and your comments and the previous comments that best efforts. I don't think that we should put you in an awkward situation where you have to make that decision. I think taking out what AUMA recommends, you can still, if we take out the word or, you can still post it tonight and start the clock, but it just would require you to post it in the paper. So the word or gives an opportunity, and I'm not saying this is your intention, and I fully believe that it's not, but it does provide that opportunity. If we take it out, then it's black and white, that every time we need to post, it goes in the paper, and I guess that's where I'm looking to go. So definitely, and you got B, C, and D in there, and then you can still post on Tuesday night or Wednesday morning.
So you're proposing an amendment?
Yeah. And so again, me with the protocol and process around this, I'm not sure if I propose this and it gets defeated, then what happens? Because I don't want to.
Well, we'll vote on the amendment.
Okay.
And then we will vote on the original. CEO, Mr. Schwartz.
Yeah, just to weigh in a little bit more on what Mr. Harris has been adding. This is a recommendation from AUMA to allow us the flexibility. If we are going to remove that flexibility and we must advertise in the paper, then where there is days required for public notification, then that will not start until it goes into the newspaper. So part of adding the flexibility was allowing us to respond quicker. So that's one of the drawbacks. I'm not saying it's the end of the world, but that is a drawback. So now by rewording it, then the notification doesn't start until the newspaper comes out. So if we miss the newspaper that week, then our public notification does not start until the next week. That's just one of the ramifications. Thank you.
Fair enough.
And through,
go ahead.
And through your worship, if you want it just in the paper to start with, there's no need of passing this bylaw because we do advertise in other sources. So what this bylaw allows you to do is advertise prior to going into the paper. But if you say the paper and the following, you don't need to pass this bylaw because we do that already. So you can defeat the bylaw if that's what you so desire.
Thank you. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship, and appreciate the discussion on this. I don't really understand if Councillor Munkoff-Swain taking the or out would be the answer either, because that would basically say we had to do all of this, and I don't think we're saying everything all the time is necessary. For example, or are we saying that only D, posting it on the digital sign, would be enough? And that's what worried me, that one of these would fit the meaning the way it's written. So my inclination, and if there isn't a time crunch, could we not send this back to the administration to write it in a way that we get across? We seem to all know what we want to do, but we don't want our administration to be put in a situation of potentially down the road picking one and it not be the right one or ones.
Through worship, if the intent is to advertise in the paper first, that's when the time starts. That's already in the Local Government Act, or sorry, the Municipal Government Act, under Section 606. That's what we're required to follow. What this gives us the ability to, if we need to do something quicker, to get it out quicker, to deal with the urgent issue that requires notification, it gives you that leeway. And if, God forbid, we've missed putting it in the paper, due to whatever reason, it pushes it back further. So I understand the concerns of council, but effectively, as I indicated, there's no way you can write this without setting that starting date of the paper. So the easiest thing to do would be to defeat it.
Fair enough. Councillor Markov-Swain, followed by Councillor Danlick.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, to be clear, the intention is not to require the newspaper to be the first point of call to advertise. What I've heard you saying is that if we make sure that we have to advertise in the newspaper, that's when we start the clock. But what I haven't heard explained to me well enough in order for me to be okay with this is why. Why can't we're in the Municipal Government Act, and I'm putting you on the spot, but you know this like the back of your hand, but where in the Municipal Government Act does it say that, from my understanding is that you just need to provide X amount of days notification, right? So if we published on the Wednesday through social media, and then we got it in the paper on the Friday, and then the following Friday, the clock should start on the Wednesday. So if you can explain to me in the Municipal Government Act why that isn't the case, then I'm okay with this. But from what I'm hearing is you're just saying it, I don't have any backup information.
Through worship to Councillor Markov-Swain, it is in Section 606 and 606.1, which this bylaw relates to. Section 606 deems it the requirement of the municipality to advertise in the local newspaper or to mail out to residents. That is the first requirement. What this bylaw does is give you the option to go, is not to do the paper up first and to do something else first, be it social media, be it Facebook or whatever. That's why the or. If you put in the word if you say that the paper is the first and one of the following, because that's what it's saying, is that if you have to advertise in the paper, it starts with the paper and then or is afterwards. And this, so you're starting with it. So 606 is the requirement. 606.1 is allowing you to do other than the paper first. And that's why they want to use the words and, because they don't want to take it away from the paper, which you could, but it's the or's kind of a deal. What we can do is, if you want to defer at this time, I'm getting a shake of no, is to provide you the information provided by AMA in regards to it. But
Okay, Councillor Danlick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to clarify one of the small points. So my understanding is, as I listen to my colleagues debate this issue this evening, is that the slash or the word or does provide us more flexibility as opposed to taking away flexibility. Is that correct?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Danlick, the rest of council and the public, yes.
I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Mr. Harris, for the clarification. If I'm understanding what you just said, the newspaper is a must. That's a for sure. You said it's the first, and it's right in the report that we received in the bylaw. It says that as a whereas, it has to be in the newspaper.
That's part of the MGA.
Through Your Worship
Is that right?
to Councillor Barnhart, the rest of the council and the public, no, you don't have to do it in the paper. No, it's not a must. What it's saying, the whole premise of it is to say that it's not supposed to reduce the amount of advertising that goes out. That's the premise of it. I can understand council's angst in regards to the way the wording is. There is a level of trust that's required with administration. And if we can continue with the paper, and that's the first, start. It's just a timing issue, and it's not. You do not have to pass this bylaw. Municipalities do not have to pass this bylaw. It's just a way to provide, in a situation where you need extra time or you need to do a shorter time period, that's what it allows. So I'm comfortable if council doesn't adopt it, and we can go back and look at other stuff, but it wouldn't come back for 6 months, basically.
Fair enough. I got to admit, I'm comfortable. I know you hit the nail right on the head. There's a level of trust, and I think you've heard tonight that council wishes the paper to be part of it.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with the passing this bylaw tonight and seeing how it runs, and we can always adjust it later. But yeah, I think I'm comfortable with this bylaw this evening. Ms. Mohammed.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to offer up that one of the reasons why AUMA is offering this as part of a template and/or is because a lot of local communities are losing their local paper. So this provides a little bit more flexibility if we ever find ourselves in that situation. Thank you.
Fair enough. Any further comments? No? All right. Call the vote. All in favor? That carries 4-1. Do I have a member of council prepared to move third reading? Councillor Hendricks.
So moved.
Discussion on the motion? All in favor? Carries 4-1. All right. Okay, next item on the agenda tonight is councillor committee reports. Is there a member of council wishing to address council this evening? Okay, seeing none, I have one small quick report. Last week I took the opportunity to get out in front of a few of our ministers and do a little lobbying on behalf of the town of Beaumont and the Mid-Cities mayors. We were down in Calgary and managed to get a little FaceTime with the Premier, Minister Ganley, Minister Ceci, and Minister Jansen. So I just wanted to give council a quick update on that. And so essentially we went down there with two things in the back of our heads. We wanted to talk about Aquafit 2, grant funding surrounding that. And so we had a great conversation with Minister Jansen. She will be back in Edmonton after Stampede for 2 days, and she has graciously agreed to try and fit us into her schedule. So we are currently following up with that and are hopeful that we'll be able to nail down a meeting time soon and be able to go talk about some grant funding for Aquafit 2. As you all know, we're also part of the Mid-Cities Mayors Caucus, and part of what came out of our meeting back in April was we wanted to, as a group, go lobby the government on behalf of policing the cost disparities between rural and urban centers. We also wanted to talk about MSI, a replacement for MSI, and we wanted to talk about the cannabis excise tax distribution. And so we talked to Minister Ceci about the excise tax distribution, and the word we got from him was basically keep your receipts. So a little bit of work to be done on that. So it was kind of on that file, so that wasn't all that encouraging, but we continue to move forward. And we got a chance to talk to Minister Ganley about opening up policing and seeing what we could do with the cost share there, and she did indicate that they're about to open up the Police Act, so I'm not quite sure if the two are related, but once again, we managed to get a little bit of FaceTime in that, and hopefully we will be able to secure some meetings going into the fall. The other thing that we managed to do with all four was remind them that of the mid-sized municipalities, there are 21 of us with 25 constituencies, 1.3 million people that don't think of ourselves as either Edmonton, Calgary, or rural. And so I implore you, every time you get near a minister or an MLA, that you somehow slip that little 2-minute blurb into conversation, because they tend to forget about us as a group. And so that was our meeting. That was not really a meeting, but a little adventure and a little bit of lobbying we managed to get done last week. And that's all I have for this evening. Are there any further comments or questions from members of council? No. All right, CAO, you're up.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. Just very quickly, the information report that was in the council package regarding the census results. I just want to say thank you to all the census workers and to our legislative staff who did a very thorough job this year. I got a chance to hear some of the challenging stories from people that go door to door seeking information, and it's alarming in some cases, amusing in others. But I thank everybody for their efforts. Also want to recognize the planning staff that right now is our busiest season for permits, and they are working very, very hard. I also can appreciate the patience that's required from the residents and businesses, but we're going flat out right now and trying to keep up. One other item, and I should have reminded you about this, Mayor, maybe you want to speak about it, was the Intermunicipal Planning Oversight Committee meeting on July 6th, and I'll pass that back over to you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yes, actually, I guess there is another item on the agenda tonight for me. We did have a meeting of the Oversight Committee of the Intermunicipal Planning Accord between us, the City of Edmonton, and Leduc County. We did have a significant discussion surrounding geographic boundaries and what that means to Beaumont, and so we've referred that issue back to the working group to better define it, and hopefully we'll have a better update come the fall when our next meeting is. We're currently scheduled to meet September 14th. It's back in my book. September 20th. As well, we had a discussion surrounding, because one of the planning principles was the discussion surrounding cost-benefit analysis, and the Oversight Committee decided to, because the Airport Accord is currently doing a fair amount of work on that, and as well as the EMRB is about to embark on a big body of work, it's going to be a standing item, and we're just going to hopefully piggyback off what they're doing before we jump into full analysis and formulas and stuff. We're going to see if we can utilize work that's already being done elsewhere. We had a large discussion surrounding recreation. It seems recreation is the poor cousin, neighbor, stepchild that nobody wants to deal with. The EMRB declined to deal with it at the last EMRB meeting, and the Oversight Committee has also declined to deal with it as part of the Intermunicipal Planning Framework. So we still have to go do ICFs, inter-community frameworks, with Leduc County and the City of Edmonton as surrounding recreation. Because there's a large planning component and whatnot, we didn't want to muddy the waters with trying to incorporate recreation inside of it as well. I'm finding it a little disheartening that nobody wants to do this as a group, but we're going to be on our own, and we'll have to do it on ourselves, do it bilaterally with the City of Edmonton and bilaterally with Leduc County. And that's the update on that meeting. I apologize, I should have had that down in my notes to do. Did I miss anything? Thanks. Any further comments or questions from members of council? CAO, are you? You're done? Yes. You're good? Councillor Daniluk.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure if I should ask this question now or of administration or later, but if I may, 30th Avenue in town here, I believe that's our road. It's an internal road within our boundaries. And if you're going west from the gas station there, No Frills, going towards Fountain Tire, that road is becoming increasingly uneven around the manholes where there's lots of depression and your car's bouncing around. And I've had a few residents ask me about if that road is going to be addressed or something. So first question is, I'm assuming it's our road, and if it is there any plans to help that be a little more even? Thank you.
Ms. Mohammed.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Daniluk. The road, that's a complicated area. So there's an agreement down there that there's still a second lift that needs to be put on the road. So when you construct, you put the first layer down, and then this will be the second layer of asphalt that will go down. When that second layer of asphalt goes down, it should level out the road so you're not kind of flying up and down those bumps anymore. You can generally tell when you're driving down the road where a second lift is needed by looking at the curb and gutter. If it sticks up a little bit above the asphalt, there's a second lift still coming to that road. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. There's no correspondence on the agenda this evening. Are there any notices of motion? No notices of motion. There are no in-camera items, so therefore we are adjourned.